I remember sitting at the dining table, my fork hovering over a plate I didn't even want to touch, while my family laughed and shared stories like I wasn't even there. Every conversation felt like a reminder that I was falling short. My successes invisible, my failures magnified. I could feel their eyes flicking to me every so often, measuring, comparing. My older brother had just gotten a promotion, my sister was off traveling somewhere exotic, and there I was, stuck in the same apartment, the same routine, the same quiet feeling of being nothing. I tried to join in, to offer a smile or a comment, but it felt forced, hollow. A text notification buzzed in my pocket, and I ignored it, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want anyone, even a stranger on the other end of a message, to see how much I was crumbling. Inside, the room smelled faintly of roasted chicken and candle wax, warm and comforting to them, but suffocating to me. I kept my hands folded on the table, fingers tapping nervously, trying to disappear into the wood grain. Every laugh, every clink of a fork was a reminder I was the invisible one, the failure, the disappointment they never said aloud, but made sure I could feel in every glance, every sigh, every subtle shake of the head. I wanted to be someone they were proud of, but for now, I was just a shadow in their perfect little world. Every morning felt like stepping into a race I was already losing. I would wake up before dawn, the apartment still heavy with silence, the faint hum of the city outside my window my only companion. I poured coffee into a chipped mug and tried to convince myself that today would be different, that today I'd finally make some progress, prove them wrong, prove myself right. But by mid-morning, the doubts crept in like shadows along the walls. Maybe they were right all along. Maybe I am just not enough. My laptop screen blurred with spreadsheets, emails, and half-finished projects. I stared at it for hours, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, frozen by fear that anything I typed wouldn't matter. Sometimes I tried calling a friend, hoping for a word of encouragement, but the conversation always circled back to them, their accomplishments, their milestones, their lives that seemed to run on a different, brighter track. I would close my eyes and remember the small victories I had achieved, finishing a project, hitting a minor goal, but even those felt meaningless when no one else acknowledged them. Nights were worse. The apartment felt colder after sunset, the hum of the city replaced by the eerie quiet of my own thoughts. I would pace the rooms, gripping empty coffee cups or crumpled notes, wondering why effort seemed to vanish into nothing, why each day left me feeling smaller than before. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized the person staring back, eyes tired, shoulders slouched, a hint of hope buried deep under layers of frustration. And yet, despite everything, I kept going, because stopping would mean admitting that maybe, just maybe, they were right. It happened one evening, during what was supposed to be a casual family gathering. I had been nervously stirring my tea, trying to stay invisible, when my sister's voice cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. "You really need to get your act together," she said, as if reading my thoughts aloud. My parents exchanged glances, subtle but loaded with disappointment, and I felt the weight of every unspoken word pressing down on me. I wanted to shrink into the chair, to disappear entirely, but instead I sat frozen, cheeks burning, heart pounding in a rhythm I couldn't control. Every laugh around the table felt like it was aimed at me, every subtle sigh a judgment I could not escape. I remembered the countless times I had tried to explain my struggles, the nights I stayed up working, the tiny wins that no one seemed to notice. Why can't they see me? I thought, my stomach twisting. Why do they only see what's missing? The room smelled faintly of roasted vegetables and candle wax, but it couldn't mask the sharp sting of humiliation. My hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as my parents' words continued to echo in my mind even after they had stopped speaking. I could hear the click of silverware, the soft thud of napkins being folded, and everything felt magnified, sharper, crueler. In that moment, I realized that no matter what I did, nothing I achieved would ever fill the invisible void they seemed determined to remind me of. I was the failure, the disappointment, and they had no intention of letting me forget it. The tension in the room shifted subtly the moment he walked in. My sister's husband, someone I had only seen in passing at family events, entered with a calm confidence that seemed to cut through the heaviness like sunlight through clouds. He greeted everyone warmly, but when his eyes landed on me, it was different. It wasn't judgment or the faint irritation I had grown accustomed to from my family. It was curiosity. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. The strange, unsettling sensation of being seen. I shifted in my chair, unsure of how to respond, caught somewhere between relief and suspicion. He asked a few questions about my work, questions that went beyond polite small talk, questions that showed he genuinely wanted to know. As I spoke, fumbling at first, I noticed him nodding, leaning slightly forward, the tiniest spark of recognition. In his eyes. He's listening, I thought. He actually sees me. And for a brief, fleeting moment, I imagined what it would be like if someone could look past the years of family judgment and really understand who I was, the struggles I had endured, the nights spent working alone in an apartment that smelled faintly of stale coffee and late-night anxiety. I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Fear that I'd be disappointed, and hope that maybe, just maybe, someone outside my family could see value in me, even when they couldn't. The air felt lighter, somehow, as if the room itself had shifted. In his presence, and I realized I hadn't felt this attention, this kind of genuine interest, in years, and then he asked it. Just a simple question, spoken in a calm, steady tone that somehow made the world tilt on its axis. Are you the founder? For a moment, I froze, my mind scrambling to process the words. Me? The founder? Surely he must be mistaken. My chest tightened, and a shiver ran down my spine, the kind that comes when reality feels too surreal to trust. I glanced around at my family, expecting to see a smirk, a hint of mockery, the subtle scoff I had grown used to, but no one reacted. Silence fell, thick and almost sacred, as if even the room itself was holding its breath. My thoughts raced. Could he actually know? Do they know what I've been doing all these years? How much I've struggled? My fingers fidgeted with the edge of my sleeve, heart hammering against my ribs, threatening to escape. The aroma of roasted chicken and warm bread seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the electric charge of the moment. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to disappear, but all I could do was stare at him, a mix of shock and disbelief plastered across my face. The question lingered in the air, heavy with possibility, and for the first time in years, I felt seen, not by my family, not by anyone who had dismissed me, but by someone who actually recognized the work, the perseverance, the hidden victories that no one else had ever noticed. His words echoed in my mind. I couldn't help but be pulled back to all those nights no one had noticed, all the moments my family never bothered to see. I remembered sitting at my tiny desk in the corner of my cramped apartment, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room, fingers aching from typing until they cramped, eyes stinging from exhaustion. I remembered the hum of the city, outside my window, muffled by the thin walls, and the smell of instant noodles and cold coffee that became my silent companions. Every late night was a battle against doubt, a quiet conversation with myself where I whispered, "Keep going. It's worth it." There were moments I cried quietly, tears falling onto blank notebooks, onto keyboards, onto pages filled with plans and ideas no one would ever understand. I recalled the small victories, like finally finishing a prototype, receiving a single, encouraging email, or making a tiny breakthrough after hours of staring at lines of code that didn't make sense. No one celebrated those nights. No one called to say, "I'm proud of you." They only saw the apartment cluttered with evidence of struggle, the unpolished results, the failures I carried like stones in my pocket. And yet, through every setback, every quiet moment of despair, I had kept going, building something that my family dismissed as insignificant. Now, hearing him say those words, the founder, I realized that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ignored text, and forgotten meal had a purpose. For the first time, someone outside my family saw it. Someone acknowledged the journey no one else had cared to notice. The weight I had carried for years felt a little lighter, like someone had finally opened a window and let the air in. Sitting there, still reeling from the question, a quiet realization began to settle in my chest. For years, I had let my family's opinions define me, their disappointment shaping the way I saw myself. But hearing him speak, really seeing me for who I was, not who they thought I should be, shifted something inside. Maybe I wasn't a failure. Maybe my worth didn't depend on their approval. I thought about the countless nights I had poured into my work, the relentless effort no one acknowledged, the tiny victories that had felt meaningless when celebrated only in my own mind. And suddenly, those moments weren't small anymore. They were proof of persistence, proof of grit, proof that I had kept building when everyone else had given up on noticing me. A soft warmth spread through me, subtle but undeniable, like the first light of morning slipping through a curtain. I felt lighter, stronger, as if the invisible chains of their judgment were finally loosening. I could almost laugh at the irony. All this time, I had been my own harshest critic, and now, validation had come from the most unexpected place. I realized that recognition from others could be a mirror, reflecting the value I had always carried inside. I didn't need them to call me successful. I just needed to remember who I was and what I had built. And for the first time in years, I felt a quiet, steady sense of self-worth. Fragile, yes, but real, and entirely mine that I don't think I needed to say much. Sometimes, confrontation isn't about loud arguments or angry words. It's about quiet realization, about letting your presence and your choices speak for themselves. I caught my parents' eyes across the room one evening and felt a subtle shift within me. Their disapproval, the judgments I had carried for so long, no longer held the same power. I realized I didn't need to justify myself to them, didn't need their approval to feel whole. The memories of all those dinners, all those whispered criticisms, still lingered, but they no longer defined me. I could choose to acknowledge them, yes, but not to let them dictate my worth. I thought about the sister's husband, the way he had seen me, really seen me, and it made me reflect on what it meant to be recognized for your own work, your own efforts. Walking through the apartment that night, I felt lighter, the air somehow cleaner, the hum of the city outside less oppressive. I imagined telling them, not with anger but with quiet certainty, I know who I am. I've built something meaningful, and that is enough. No one had to say it aloud. I felt it in my bones. For the first time, I could exist in the same space with them without shrinking, without seeking their validation. And while some old wounds would always remain, I knew I had the power to move forward on my own terms, guided by my own sense of value rather than the echo of their judgment. Months later, the world outside my family finally seemed to catch up with what I had been building all along. Emails of congratulations flooded my inbox, social media notifications buzzed incessantly, and messages from colleagues and mentors reminded me that my work mattered, that it was seen, valued, and respected. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the screen in disbelief, a slow smile spreading across my face as I realized that for the first time, success felt real, tangible, and entirely mine. There was a warmth in that moment, a deep, satisfying acknowledgement that all those sleepless nights, all the quiet sacrifices had not been in vain. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and paper, familiar and comforting, but now it no longer carried the weight of judgment. It was a place of creation, a space where my efforts had blossomed into something recognized by the world beyond my family's narrow view. I replayed the sister's husband's question in my mind. Are you the founder? And now it wasn't a source of shock or disbelief, but a validation of everything I had endured. I realized that true recognition doesn't always come from those closest to us. Sometimes it arrives from unexpected places, from those willing to see our worth when others cannot. And in that realization, I felt joy, pride, and a profound sense of relief. I had finally stepped into my own light, and for the first time, I allowed myself to bask in it fully, without apology, without shame, standing there, looking out over the city skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. I finally felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The opinions that once weighed me down, the constant comparisons, the whispered judgments, they no longer had a hold on me. I had built something meaningful, something real, and that truth existed independent of anyone else's approval. I thought about my family, about the years spent trying to fit into a mold they had crafted, and I realized that their inability to see me didn't diminish my achievements or my worth. I had learned to measure myself not by their expectations, but by my own standards, by the effort I poured into every sleepless night, every setback, every small victory. A quiet smile spread across my face as I stepped away from the window, the fading sunlight casting long, warm shadows across the room. For the first time, I felt fully present in my own life, empowered, confident, and unshakably aware of my own value. I knew there would always be moments of doubt, moments when old voices echoed in my mind. But now I had a foundation strong enough to stand on. I was no longer defined by their words or their disbelief. I was defined by my own persistence, my own vision, and my own courage to keep moving forward. And in that realization, I felt free.